What's up, yins guys? Welcome back to another episode of Fishing PA with Ryan Reed. It has been an extremely long work week, 65 hours plus. I got my glass of bourbon and I am ready to talk some fishing. Now recently, one of the guys that I work with asked me when I was going to do an episode on walleye fishing. Nader grew up around the city of Pittsburgh, fishing the rivers of the city of Pittsburgh. I grew up fishing walleye at Pymatuming Lake, Lake Glendale, Yellow Creek, Deep Creek Lake, Maryland, and of course, the walleye capital of the world, Lake Erie. Now, walleye fishing was my passion when I was younger, and for so many years, I focused on walleye only. And really, fishing for walleye is what drove me to start using artificial lures. Now, as many of you know, walleye can be an extremely finicky fish to catch. However, there are times where they will attack lures with reckless abandon. When I talk to the majority of walleye fishermen and ask them what they're catching fish on, the majority of the time it's live bait. So what I would like to do is, I would like to share with you guys some of the artificial lures and some of the live bait rigs that I use to catch walleye, not only in the state of PA, but anywhere you're going to find the species, even up into Canada. Before I get into that though, I want to explain a little bit about the fish. Walleyes are known to be a finicky feeding fish, but there are times, again, where they will crush artificial lures and even crush live bait. Walleyes are a schooling fish, so when you find one fish, more than likely you're going to find others. Most often, walleyes will relate to structural elements like rock humps, inside turns, break lines, transition lines, and even man-made elements or cribs. But this is exactly why our presentation has to be precise, because we want to offer that bait and keep it in the strike zone as long as possible. Now, other times on large bodies of water like the Great Lakes and specifically Lake Erie, walleyes will scatter or suspend over featureless bottoms, and they'll hang out below schools of bait fish. Now, this is exactly why boat control is so important, regardless if you're wind drifting or you're trolling. You have to consistently keep your eye on the depth and make sure that you can keep that bait in the strike zone as long as possible. Okay, so my general rule of thumb for live bait when you're fishing for walleyes, and this, you guys may not agree with this because what works for me may not work for you. I would love to hear your opinion on this because not only will it help me kind of understand and learn more, but I think it's beneficial for you guys to share the information as well. So typically in the spring, I'm always looking at throwing minnows or fatheads. When I get into the summer though, that's when I'll switch to night crawlers and typically leeches. In the fall, I'll go back to minnows and we'll even look at like small chubs or suckers. In the wintertime, I'll go back to minnows and then large shiners. Now, the majority of the walleyes that I've caught on live bait though have come on typically on a bottom bouncer rig or some kind of worm harness. So a lot of times I'm throwing night crawlers even in the spring. But the general rule of thumb is to kind of stick with your minnows or your fatheads, this time of year coming into April. Now, when you're fishing with live bait, one of the most effective methods that you can use is a simple jig. And what do I mean by simple jig? Well, I mean something like that, if you guys can see that. Now, there's a lot of different colors that they have, like the chartreuses. Black's actually one of my favorite colors. I've caught a lot of fish on black, and you have your bright oranges and your orange reds and all kinds of different sizes and different weights. But point being, when you're using a jig tipped with either a minnow or a nightcrawler or a leech, a jig gives you a lot of versatility in the water column because you can allow that bait to drop into the strike zone and you can pull it through the water column into multiple strike zones. Whether the fish are on the bottom or whether they're suspended, a jig will find those fish and it'll help you catch them. Now, another method is basically a slip sinker rig. Or you guys can even just throw a blank hook with some weight on it and wind drift that across the bottom. I know a lot of guys in Deep Creek. Deep Creek Lake is a clear reservoir. So artificial baits, for whatever reason, they just don't work as well. I have tried continuously to throw artificial baits on Deep Creek, and I always have more luck with actual live bait on a blank hook and a split shot. So again, it's the same scenario with a jig basically. You can control your depth with the amount of weight that you add on, and then you have your live bait on the end of a hook, and that'll also produce fish for you. Now, somebody recently told me that they go up to Pymatuning and they fish the causeway, and what they do is they throw a bobber and a hook with a minnow, and they catch walleye all day long. This also can be an effective way to catch walleyes given the right scenario. Now, there's a few other ways to catch walleye, one of which that I thought was crazy was spinner baits. I've seen it done. I have personally caught walleye on spinner baits. If you drop the spinner bait, if you have a heavy enough weight on the spinner bait, or the head of it is heavy enough, 1/2 ounce or larger, to get down in the water column, the possibility of catching a walleye on a spinner bait is there. There are also many different types of spinner rigs that you guys can use, similar to what we would catch trout on. For some reason, they produce fish. So that's just another method, and you can usually tip those with, a worm or a minnow, and it'll work out for you. How many of you guys have trolled for walleye on Lake Erie? I can tell you I have not done it a lot because I like to wind drift. However, the few times that I have trolled with planer boards, we've limited out pretty much every time. And we caught fish from anything to a spoon like this, to a crankbait like this, to crankbaits like this. So, trolling can be an effective method to catch walleyes, especially with the right gear. When you start talking about using side planer boards and downriggers and those types of things, that's pretty much how they produce the majority of their fish up in Erie, especially in certain areas where you just don't get the wind. I fished with Seabreeze charters a few years back. When we got out onto the lake, it was not like fishing off of Catawba Island because they just didn't have the wind. So we ended up trolling. We ended up limiting out for both days. We stayed in Ohio, so the fish weren't as big as they are in Canada. However, it was a productive trip, and we used crankbaits and spoons pretty much the whole time. So, there's a million other ways to fish and catch walleyes. If you watch Al Linder, he'll give you 10 different ways to catch walleyes, whether that's dead sticking or bombing or pitching or, using downriggers or vertical jigging. The big one now is swim baits, because you can basically tie a swim bait on. You can get that down 2 to 3 feet off the bottom, and you can start catching anything from massive pike to walleyes to bass to lake trout, really anything. So swim baits are starting to become a very versatile bait to also catch walleyes. All right, I want to talk about my top 10 or so techniques and baits to catch walleyes, and hopefully you guys will find this beneficial. I know there are a ton of walleye fishermen out there, so I don't expect to teach anybody anything new here. However, if you can pick up one of these lures that you've never catch fish with and catch a fish on it, I think it'll be beneficial for you. Okay, so I want to start at the top. We had already talked about jigs. You're going to find me vertical jigging with either a worm, leech, or minnow probably, I would say, 33% of the time. Okay, I love vertical jigging. It's one of my favorite things to do, and basically it's super easy because you get the weight on there. Like I said before, you can control that bait up and down the water column and keep it in the strike zone. Now, there are a number of lures that will get you down deeper, and there are also methods to take lures that don't go as deep to get them deeper. So let me just run down through a couple of these baits. Okay, let me start with the Storm Thunder Stick. Okay, the Storm Thunder Stick is actually a little bit of a deeper bait. They have a variety of colors. There's a real nice rattle in these, and they're very versatile. Okay, these kind of remind me of of a Reef Runner slightly, except for they don't have as much of an angle, and the Reef Runners are going to run a lot deeper. But check out the Thunder Sticks there. There's a lot of good video and a lot of good fish being caught on those. I want to talk about spoons next. One of my all-time favorite spoons. Northland Tackle does a Forage Minnow. Now they make this in a vertical jigging model and also the spoon model. For whatever reason, here is my super top secret tip for you guys. This pattern right here, I catch 99% of my fish on this pattern. And I'll show you the rig that I do the majority of my damage on a little bit later on. There's also other types of spoons out there. Doctor is another really good one. Doctor makes pretty awesome spoons. I've caught a good bit of pike on these. I used this up in Canada, and I don't think you can see the teeth marks on it, but I have a couple pike on there, and I have a couple walleye on that color actually too. Okay, another one I want to talk about, another suspending crankbait that also they make in a jerkbait. This is the Rattling Rogue. Okay, the Rattling Rogue is a great bait to troll because it has a lot of flash, it's got a little bit of a rattle on it, and the size of these are really good. Similar to what I want to talk about here in a minute, there are ways to get this a little bit deeper. Okay, one of my favorite all-time walleye lures, the Hottentot, the Hottentotty. A lot of guys told me to use these when I was younger. We would troll these, I would crank and cast them. You know, I took these to Canada with me. Actually, this gold pattern is probably one of my favorite Hottentots. But they make the Flash series and they make the original series, and these are just dynamic little baits. Nader, I know you love these. These are your jam. And they're probably a lot of your jams because the Hottentot's been around forever and it's just a killer lure. Okay, I want to talk about the Rapala Shad Wrap. Okay, the Rapala Shad Wrap, specifically this blue color and the black color, you guys will find that I use a lot of blue and a lot of black because it imitates like the Cisco's or the natural bait fish in a lake. These are the 07s. I love the action on these little guys. They're just a super awesome profile on them because they're a little bit chubbier, but they have an awesome action in the water, and they're just a good all-around bait to troll and to cast for walleyes. Another really fantastic bait, the Baby Cisco by Suick. I've caught a lot of walleye on these, and I've caught a lot of pike too, but if you guys can see that, these are really awesome. They dive fairly deep. You guys can check the specs out. I don't want to bore everybody with that, but I want to show you this color in particular because this is what I throw a lot, and I'll troll this a lot. And I don't know if you guys can see the top of that. It is beat up. There are teeth marks in this like crazy. And a lot of those came from walleyes. This blue color, if you don't own one of these and you want to buy one, buy it in blue. That one right there, that is one of my absolute favorite crankbaits for walleye and really for pike. Okay, the original. We got to talk about the original. Rapala's original floater. This baby right here, this bait right here caught me my first fish with an artificial. This was actually the first artificial bait that I caught a fish on. And I can remember I caught a smallmouth, was the first fish I caught, and the second one was a walleye right off the same spot. I was fishing off a dock, this very lure. Now the nice thing about the original floaters, okay, they don't go real deep. However, if you guys take one of the tri swivels that have the 3 circles on them, you can basically tie the end of your line to the top. You can run this off of another line on the middle swivel, and then you can put a drop shot on the bottom portion of the swivel. So you have the 3 sides. When you drop this to the bottom of the lake and you troll it, you can use that drop shot weight to get this bait a little deeper, and then it'll hang off of that swivel and actually swim deeper for you. So if you guys add some weight to these on that type of a rig, you can get these down a lot deeper, and the action on the originals are just, they're one of the best actions. This is one of the best all-time lures for multiple species. Rapala's been doing it a long time. They make a lot of different sizes. I have a lot of different colors of these bad boys, so check those out. All right, last but certainly not least, my all-time favorite walleye rig. One of two ways you can fish these. So this is a worm harness. Now, for those of you guys that don't fish with worm harnesses, you have to do it. You just absolutely have to get into this. Now, you can use a bottom bouncer rig like this, and the way this works is you basically tie your line here, and you put the spinner rig or the worm harness on and attach it to here. The worm harness hangs back. This bounces off the bottom. This blade is going to continue to spin as this is moving. Now, this is great because you can alter the weight. You can get much heavier bottom bouncer rigs, or you can do what I do a lot of the times, and you can take your worm harness like that, and you can just simply tie this on with a swivel and then just add either like an egg weight or some split shots, something above it, typically about 12 inches, and I just cast. I cast it while I'm wind drifting. I count it down. You know, I'll use different variances on my countdown. Maybe I'll go to 10, maybe I'll go to 12, maybe I'll go to 16, maybe I'll do one at 6, and then I'll just slowly reel it, or I'll just jig it, or I'll just let the wind blow and let this thing do its job spinning in the water. The majority of my fish come off of this color. I already told you about that. This is a Northland tackle. This silver with the red, this is just, and this has been my favorite all-time lure probably for catching fish in general, because the nice thing about this is I can tie this on for Deanna. We can go to Deep Creek and we can mess around for a few days on the lake, and she's going to catch bluegill, and she's going to catch perch, she's going to catch walleye. We've caught pike and pickerel on these. We've caught lake trout. And the biggest one, the absolute my top secret for catfishing, is these right here. I actually throw these on a catfish rig, and I'll just sit there and just kind of jerk it every once in a while. And this, for whatever reason, this color produces all sorts of fish. So if you guys want a good all-around lure, or you want to use live bait and you want to get into the worm harnesses, take a look at Northland Tackle. Go with that color right there to start. They also have a tremendous amount of colors. That's kind of like a trout color. I got a million of these things in my bait box here. But you know, you do a worm on there. If you really want to get crazy, you can put a leech on, or you can maybe double tip a minnow on the dual hooks, because it does have 2 hooks. But try it. Vary your weight with this. You know, this is going to get you down in the water column to that strike zone. Heavier weight for, you know, rougher days. You guys should know some of that, but heavier weight to get towards the bottom. Keep it in that strike zone. What's funny is I've actually taken these little rigs like this. My dad laughed at me hysterically. I took this over to Twin Lakes and I put this on, and we got a little paddle boat and we're out on the lake, and I was crushing largemouth on these. For whatever reason, these kick off the weeds and that blade just starts spinning and then it drops. The bass just love it. I mean, every single fish. I've caught every single species of fish on this. So, hopefully this helps. Now, I didn't get into specifications on water depth. I want you guys to take a look at that, because a lot of these lures, they work differently. You know, some of the spoons stay higher in the water column. You can add some weight to get them down. Same with the original, same with the shad wrap, same with the thunder sticks. You know, really you can play around with those and create different methods to get them lower on the water column. So, you know, ultimately for me, I'm going to stay with vertical jigging. I'm going to stay with typically like a Hottentot or a shad wrap, or the Cisco, the baby Cisco from Suick, or I'm going to be throwing a worm harness. And the majority of the time it's going to be the worm harness, because that has produced the majority of my fish. All right, so let's wrap this thing up. Hopefully I provided enough good information regarding walleyes and the baits that I use in order to catch them in the state of Pennsylvania. My goal is to try to teach you guys something new about something that you may already know about. So hopefully you found one thing in this episode that was beneficial. If you guys like the content and you like the episode, please make sure you like the video. If you like the content overall, please subscribe to my channel. I greatly appreciate everybody's time. If you guys want to see something in particular, feel free to reach out to me and I'll do my best to get a video on it. Thank you very much, guys. Take care.